first of all, know your team. Know who they are. When I say that, not just know who they are, but know about them, their family, their, where they grew up, where, about their kids' names. Take notes.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Bruce B. Baird, and you're listening to the Productive Dentist Podcast. In this podcast, I will give you everything that I've learned over the last 40 years in dentistry, working with thousands of dentists. I'll tell you, it's not that my way is the only way. It's just one that has worked extremely well for me, and I'd love to share that with you so you too can enjoy the choices and lifestyle that productivity allows. More time for things you love, increased pay, better team relationships, and lowered stress. Let's get into it with this week's episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast.
Hi, this is Dr. Bruce Baird with the Productive Dentist Podcast. Today we're going to talk about one of the questions that I get so often, and I was just doing a program this last weekend, and I got the question from several of the attendees, and I wanted to kind of get back and talk about team training and talk about how important your team is to being productive. This is episode 103, and so and I figure it's time. We've probably covered this a couple of times, but my thought process as we go becomes clearer and clearer about how important training your team is. How do you do that? I mean, one of the questions I had, the doctor is going through his third team in a matter of a year. And, he was saying, he couldn't find the right people, was having difficulties there. And I felt his pain. I've talked about this before. I think everybody in Granbury used to work for me at one point in time or another, because I was not, it was more about me than it was about them. And I explained that to him, and he said, well, this person did that, and that person did this. And one person said, said something in front of the entire team that, I didn't like the way you talked to me in front of the patient or whatever it is. And I said, well, you may have responded the exact same way if you were a team member and the boss, did that. You might have, or you might have gone individually and talked to the doctor. But he's gone through all these team members, and he said, so how do I do it? How do I become a better leader? And I said, bingo. That is the secret to this. It's becoming a better leader and inspecting what you expect, but doing it in a way that comes from the heart, not from the head. And when I say that, I was the guy who would just get very upset, and I would roll my eyes and I would sigh a lot. And so I was very confrontational. But when I realized what had happened, this is 10 or 15 years into practice, what I realized is that it was about me. It was about me and my, really my behavior and the way that I expected people to do things. And what I'll say is, the better I got, the better my team got. But let's look at some pointers and some things that you can do as a doctor to end up with a much better team, and it's probably the same people. During the program this weekend, I told the doctors, I said, I guarantee you probably 80% of the people that I hired back in the early days could have been fantastic employees. They could have been fantastic employees, meaning it wasn't so much them, it was more me. And so when I step back and look at it, I was like, okay, so what are the things that you can do to help your team? First of all, the thing that I, more than anything, that started realizing is I'm the boss, but I'm not the boss of their life. I'm not the boss. I want them, I hired a treatment coordinator to be a treatment coordinator. And they had experience. Well, I expect them to be a treatment coordinator and to know everything the way I expect it to be done. And that's not fair. It's just not fair to your team to expect them to know by osmosis what you really would like to have done. And so that's where team training becomes critical. We call that a training opportunity. And so this doctor has had several things. First of all, he's only been in practice for about 2.5 years, of which COVID was a big part of it. Then we had a giant freeze in Texas. His office flooded. So he's been through the ringer, and he's got a lot of stress, and I understand all of that. So what I told him is over the next 6 months, and he's got a great new patient flow. He's in a position where he could easily be doing $2 million a year in his practice early on. And I said, don't worry about that right now. For the next 6 months, remember, he's gone through 3 teams. For the next 6 months, concentrate on training your team exactly the way you want things done, and doing it with a smile on your face, and doing it with a realization that you're taking the effort now, and it's going to save you massive amounts of time later. You'll be productive, but what you're going to find is for next year, you're going to be 10 times more productive than you would have been, because you're going to be hiring a new team next year if you don't change the way you're doing things. And so what I do is I step back and I say, okay, first of all, know your team, know who they are. When I say that, not just know who they are, but know about them, their family, their where they grew up, about their kids' names. Take notes, not while you're talking to them, but as soon as you finish talking to that employee, you get yourself a basis. I tell you to do that with new patients, find out about them, find points in common, linking and matching and mirroring and all that. Do that with your team. And most of all, smile and just listen and get to know your team member, because the truth is, when you have a phenomenal team, and I've talked about this, 5 or 6 podcasts ago, that when I left Granbury Dental Center, as far as being a producer, I thought no one will ever produce like I did. And my 3 assistants were 30 years, 20 years, and 10 years, and they were trained by me. They didn't have experience before they came to work for me. One was Walmart, one was, worked at a vet, and another worked as a masseuse, and so a massage therapist. And so when I say that, what I started realizing is these folks have a life. They have families. They have kids. And how they do is going to affect, and how you do is going to affect everything. But when I left as a producer, Dr. Buski took over my 3 assistants. It grew him $1,000 an hour almost immediately. Why? Because they were trained. They were trained and they knew what they were doing. So it's going to be well worth your time. It's going to be well worth your time to teach them exactly the way you would want to have it done. And so that's this 6-month period that I'm telling them. I said, I really want you to spend time with them, ask questions, show them temporization, show them how you temporize a crown, show them what you expect and how you do it. Now, once you've done these things, when you do, because the big problem is, well, what happens when something happens? What happens when the temporary doesn't look good? What happens when that's not working well? Well, what do you do then? Do you roll your eyes and sigh and do that? No. What you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to say, hey, Mary, let's take a look at this. And you don't do it in front of the patient, but I will talk to it, and I'd say, like, Summer, you see how that edge around the margin? And I'd go into the lab and I say, see how the edge around the margin is kind of sharp and it's jagged and it's a little bit rough? I really want to make sure that those are really smooth, because I've had a lot of crowns done, and I don't know if you have, but that can just drive your tongue crazy. So, but it looks great other than that. Just find that positive and then give them the critique, give them the training that they need, and do it consistently. Now, what will end up happening, I tell the story about the CERAC. We started doing same-day smiles with the CERAC, and we were literally, I figured out her production per hour just in one op was $850 an hour. Now, when I say that, we marketed for same-day smiles. People want same-day smiles. I started out having Eddie Corrales come in, and Eddie's phenomenal down in San Diego, CAD Smiles, and So he would work with me. We'd do 40, 50 units in a couple of days. And so people would get their smile. We'd prep the teeth, and they get their smile early in the afternoon after they were completed. Well, my team member said, I could do that. And I said, all right, let's do it. I sent her for some training. And then she would show me the proposal, on, say, upper 8 crowns. And I would look at the proposal, and, the team member that hasn't been to 4 years of dental school doesn't understand anatomy the same way you and I do. So, they just don't see that. And so I would say, see here, the cuspid, it's got a short arm and a long arm, and it has this shape, and it had that. So I was looking at this proposal, and by the way, the software is continuing to get better and better with that. But and I would show her. And so initially, I would be looking at 8 crowns, and it might take me 30 minutes to help her, show her. So I built that into my schedule. And then after about 6 months, it was taking me about 20 minutes. And after a year, it was taking me about 15 minutes. 2 years in, I would actually literally take a look at it and I'd go, that's beautiful. That looks great. Look at the contacts. See how your contacts are shaped beautifully. See the contours. But see, I trained her on the anatomy of teeth. It was worth it to me because then I could go in, prep 8 teeth, walk out of the room. She takes over scanning, designing, milling. I would always check them, meaning I would inspect what I expect. And if she ever had a question, she felt very comfortable coming to me and asking me questions. Some are oftentimes, I would have her doing something, packing cord or, which we didn't do a lot of, but I would have her, and she would come, she goes, I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm having a difficult time with that. It wasn't like I can do everything myself, but they felt comfortable coming to me. Now, my first 15 years in practice, I promise you they didn't feel comfortable coming to me. They didn't even want to talk to me. So going back and talking to this doctor, I said, here's the thing. I want you to train your team for the next 6 months and plan on being less productive than you had been. And I know, the pressure's on, you're finally coming out of COVID, coming out of the freeze in Texas, but I want you to concentrate on your team because this is going to be the long-term play. You're not just in this for the next year. You're in this for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. This is a young dentist. And I said, so when you have a trained person in your team, little things don't matter. When I say that, they don't leave, they don't quit, they don't do those things. What they do is they believe in you because you believe in them. And, it's just so important to, and I almost feel embarrassed to even tell you, how bad I was for the first 15 years in practice. This is learnable behavior. I mean, I was horrible, but I know that you can do it. And what you're going to find is at the end of that time, you're going to find you have the most dedicated, loyal team. And you're not just producing for you, and you're not making money for you, but your team is also highly paid, highly compensated. You're taking care of their family. In many cases, you're taking care of not just them, but their family and that influence. And you're going to ask questions. How's Bob doing? Or how's Bobby doing? Or how's little Mary doing? And you want to become involved in these people's lives because you're going to spend more time with them than in many cases you are with your own spouse or your significant other. So anyway, I hope this hits home for you because I can promise you when it finally hit home for me, I actually became a productive dentist. And when it didn't, I was productive, but it was the most stressful, gut-wrenching, heart muscle and stomach lining problem that I had ever experienced in my life. And so I hope it makes sense. I look forward to next week. And good luck on training your team. It is something that's doable, and anybody can do it. So look forward to next week. Thanks, guys.
If you're losing sleep over your business and feel like you're already overloaded, but know your business needs attention, you just don't know how, when, or where to start? You're not alone. The reality is many dentists are overworking themselves, yet their practices are still struggling to be as productive as they should be. This is not sustainable, and there is a better way. That's why PDA has developed a transformative new program, Business Impact Foundations, to get you above the daily chaos and propel your business into an investment-grade practice. Using easy-to-implement proven methods combined with a unique learning atmosphere, you can activate a strategic growth plan in just 60 days. If you want to clarify your vision, align your team, and elevate the health of your community like never before, call us right now at 1-800-757-6077, extension 8, or head over to productivedentist.com/foundations to secure your spot. We have 2 sessions left this year, and each program is limited to only 20 doctors. Just for our listeners, use the code 2021IMPACT, that's 2021IMPACT, all one word, for $700 off your tuition.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe. Pass it along to a friend. Give us a like on iTunes and Spotify, or drop me an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. Don't forget to check out other podcasts from the Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentistpodcast.com. Join me again next week for another episode of the Productive Dentist Podcast.